Welcome back. Before we move into the next session, I just wanted to share something with you. On December the 28th in 2003, I was enjoying a morning coffee and reading the paper, flicking through, and I got to page 42 and I noticed an article far over in the left-hand column, perhaps that part of the paper that not many of us look at. And it was a fascinating article. Remember, this is December 28, 2003, and it was talking about 1995. And the article said that in 1995, 18,000 people died in Australia as a direct result of medical negligence. And in the same year, 501,000 hospital admissions were created due to prescription errors. And whilst I don't blame doctors for that, I think it's an overwhelmed medical system that really needs to be addressed. And I think one of the challenges is that, we all wonder why doctors are not taking more interest in what you guys are talking about, what we're talking about here. And I have a sense that one of the challenges is that still today, it's our most intellectually gifted kids who get invited into medicine, and perhaps not the kids with the biggest hearts and the greatest level of care. And I often ask the question, well, if the kids who have got the big hearts, and sort of a lot of the kids who are intellectually very smart have got big hearts as well, but there's other kids there that would make great doctors, and perhaps they might struggle with the content of the course, but I wonder why the course just can't be longer. And let's face it, these days we don't have to remember so much data because it's all there on our iPad. We really don't have to commit that much to memory. But this area of open hearts is something that's pretty dear to me because we've come so far, we've created so much in this world by using the rational mind. But it's also the rational mind that commits young men to go off to war and kill each other. It's time for us to recognise those people that have got big hearts and who care about something greater than themselves and their own self-interest. And one evening I came home a little early and the television set was on and there was a program running, and I looked at the screen and I was captivated by the presenter. It was a current affairs show. And I thought, well, this person's very different. There's something about this woman. I could feel her heart. There was something bigger in her intention. And I thought to myself initially, what's she doing on this show? But it's a stepping stone. And it held my attention for some time. My attention kept going back to this excitement of this person in the media who felt like they were driven by something very big. It reminded me of Jana Wendt. And so I looked her up online and I thought, wow, this lady's here to do big things on this planet. So I found her website and sent her a note because I feel like people who have got those big intentions need to be encouraged. And it started a great friendship. And what you saw today is the product of a very big heart with an enormous amount of courage and an unshakable care for humanity. And that's what we need to celebrate in our society. And please don't get frustrated with doctors, because a lot of them, they've successfully lived their lives operating from the rational mind. What we need to do now is help them to open their hearts and learn care. I think that's what Lucy's doing. So I'd like to welcome Lucy up to introduce our host for the rest of today. Thank you.
Thanks, John. We actually fought over who was going to introduce Helen, because this is actually supposed to be Helen's day, but Helen was going to be running late, so John was the stand-in, and I'd already written the introduction, which for me is very personal, so we fought over it. So we're both doing it. Okay, so Helen Kapalos is a journalist, a presenter, a filmmaker, an executive producer, chairperson of the Victorian Multicultural Commission, and a friend. Helen says when it comes to news, integrity is key. As an investigative reporter, she sees her responsibility being to uncover the truth and to be an honest conduit for what's happening in the world. But Helen says people are discerning with content. They rely on you as a source of credible information. That's why she has a strong focus on key values such as reliability, honesty, transparency, empathy, and compassion. So with more than 20 years' experience across each of the commercial networks in Australia, as well as 2 public broadcasters, news gatherings and storytelling has given her the avenue to engage with people from around the world, to empower people, to leave them with a message that truly connects and resonates. Helen quotes Eleanor Roosevelt as her inspiration when she said, "We gain strength and courage and confidence by each experience in which we really stop to look fear in the face. We must do that which we think we cannot." That certainly has been my lived experience with Helen. I hand you over to the lovely Helen Kapalos, who will be our hostess, albeit a bit late for the day. And obviously we've just seen her documentary, The Truth About Medical Marijuana, which for me makes me cry every time I see it, but it's a way of Dan living on. But now we're going to tackle some very difficult questions around medical necessity and human rights. So over to Helen. Thank you. Oh, I don't think Bastian's here.
Okay, good morning. I've just got to work the notes out. So I'm not sure who actually, Luce, I might have to get you to come back and just tell me who I'm introing. But while I do that, I just wanted to say thank you to both John and Lucy for what it's probably the most fulsome introduction I've ever received in my life, and really undeserved in such a big sense, because for me, the courage and the huge hearts and humanity is out there with you. I've simply been a conduit to tell this story. And Lucy and I, how many times did we say in your living room or in a hotel room, or when all this was unfolding, that we thought that God might have been the executive producer, because things just magically fell into place. It was so strange. Even in Israel, we just got access to, as you could see in the documentary, we got into places that you just don't get into. We spoke to doctors, we heard them speak with depth, compassion and courage. And I think for me, I say that this is the story that I'll have for life. It's the thing that I had to do, and I was very happy to mortgage my home to do it. To my great horror, now that I'm selling my home, it's on all over the net this morning, which is bizarre. But anyhow, it's to me, doing this documentary and meeting all of you led to a big shift of consciousness about what we think we're attached to and who we are and what humanity actually is. And my new job is Multicultural Commissioner. So at the moment I'm in the middle of Ramadan, and we've been doing a lot with Muslim families and people that really don't have a voice. And in a sense I see this being exactly the same story, but one that has life and death consequences. So I'm deeply emotionally and soulfully invested in the cause, and very, very pleased to be with you today. And I'm sorry for being late this morning. I've just, right after the symposium finishes, I'm speaking about sport and de-radicalisation. So there you go. My life has taken a very different turn. Anyhow. So we do have a panel, and I'll introduce, I'm not quite sure where all of the intros are, but I do know that our panel members are very esteemed, and a few of them appeared in the documentary. And so I might introduce David Caldecott first. Do we have a little intro for David?
David's not on it.
He's not on the intro. Well, David, maybe you could come up and...
He's
not on the panel. You're not on the panel. No. All right. So as you can see, you're in good hands. You're going to have a fun day with me today. So I can just see. All right. Now, okay, Ilan Linda. Now, I haven't met Ilan. Apparently, you've just spoken this morning and you're here from Israel. So please welcome to the stage, Ilan, and I will locate your introduction.
Well, we've just met
We've
you,
just
Mum.
introduced you, so
Yeah.
don't worry. Everyone knows
We're
you,
very organic
except
here.
me. I'll meet you in just a few moments. And we also have the lovely Greg Barnes, who also needs no introduction, human rights barrister, and has done an exemplary job advocating for families all around this country. In fact, he's been not just the primary conduit, but at times the only conduit to them, particularly in the earlier days of this debate. So please welcome to the stage Greg Barnes. Wow, I'm really winging it here. Someone else who needs no introduction, the lovely Carol Ireland from Epilepsy Australia. Again, Carol, you have been someone else that's been all heart and soul around this. I thank you so much. I know you've done a lot with the documentary. You've advocated for families. You really get it. You understand every aspect of this debate, and I applaud you for the way that you've navigated yourself in public forums, in government settings, and in community and face-to-face interactions as well. So just beautiful. So welcome to the stage, Carol Ireland.
So which is Nicoletti.
Okay, we have someone I haven't met before. I'm looking forward to meeting you, Dr. Teresa Nicoletti, who is a partner in intellectual property and health sciences at Mills Oakley. She's worked as a healthcare practitioner for the past 25 years and has been working in medicinal cannabis since the first legislation was tabled. So looking forward to hearing from you, Nicoletta.
Teresa.
And, Teresa, I mean. Oh my gosh. Okay, get me a coffee, someone, fast. Okay, now Sherry O'Connell. Sherry, I feel as though I know you. In fact, I feel I'm amongst family today. Seeing all my beautiful friends, and I'm about to introduce my next friend. But Sherry, even though we haven't actually ever met, or we've met in passing very quickly, I know you've been inextricably linked to all of the families and this debate, and that you've provided so much courage and wisdom to so many of the families, and you've been one of the families, of course. So we're here to hear your story. In fact, yours is really interesting. It's a complete juxtaposition with Michelle's, who we're about to introduce, because you've had access to medicinal cannabis and the oil. So we're looking forward to hearing from you and your lived experience.
Michelle, and we're going to start with a little video.
Okay, and last but not least, the wonderful, the great, the woman who's boundless in enthusiasm, and not just that, but your courage has, it's unparalleled, Michelle, it really is. And your great big heart, the amount, I shudder to think how many hours you've spent on the phone, not just to journalists, but particularly to families, offering them courage, and also, not to mention their own personal circumstances that you've had to go through. We know there's been very, very difficult stages, not just with Jai's epilepsy, but so many personal circumstances. It would have absolutely flattened anyone else. But you just rise again. You remind me of that beautiful Maya Angelou poem that says, "Still I rise," and you do. So please welcome to the stage, Michele Whitelaw. And we're just going to roll a quick video that we shot with Michelle a couple of years ago now.
To me, it sounds like a miracle. To me, it sounds like a cure. To me, it sounds like liquid gold.
Hospital records show that Jai's epilepsy caused up to 500 seizures a day. The human toll on the family, and especially Michelle, was exacting. This is a post she addressed to the online epilepsy community a year ago.
That's epilepsy. That's my life. Try living not knowing if your kid's going to wake up tomorrow, because that's what it's about. That's the life we live. There's no sleep, there's no rest, there's no privacy, there's no life, there's no nothing. I don't know how I'm meant to be happy or how I'm meant to look forward to life or tomorrow when it's just suffering and pain. I'm just not cut out for this anymore. I'm tired. So tired.
At breaking point, Michele made a decision that not only changed her life, but the life of her son Jai. She contacted one of the main black market suppliers, Tony Bauer, who started administering cannabis oil drops to Jai day and night.
So, and what's life like now for you?
Yeah, I'm tired because he's so active now. He's so
So you're
alert.
tired for a different reason?
I was tired before because I never slept, and now he's actually keeping me up and living off less amount of hours sleep because he wants to discuss everything. He wants to communicate. He wants to learn. He wants to, just go. So we've had so many firsts, like he can now ride a bike. He's never been able to ride a bike. He's kicking a ball with no problems, no falling over. He's now getting his first report card ever. It's just everything. It's like everything's changed, and it's changed that much and so quickly in such a short time.
That's beautiful. And actually what was interesting is that shortly after that, Jai actually popped into the Skype feed and started conversing with great recall and vigour. And Michele, I think as I've mentioned, you've had your own personal circumstances, but you've taken us into the world of epilepsy in a really profound way, in a way that we understand that this is 24/7, the impact. So if we could start with you, if you could paint a little bit of a picture about where Jai's up to now, but as I mentioned in the intro, you're in the exact opposite position to Sherry, which is that you still can't access the oil.
Well, basically, can everyone hear me?
Yep. Can you hear?
Yep. Our position now is Jai's off pharmaceuticals. He was on a total of having 35 tablets a day. So he's pharmaceutical free. He's been pharmaceutical free for the last 2 months. And he hasn't had a seizure as of next week. He's been 2 years consecutive seizure free. He's only had the 4 breakthrough seizures since we started administering back in December 2014. Our situation currently now is that Jai can attend school, but he can only attend school half days. He needs a midday dose. Regardless of what the specialists have seen unfold, regardless if they support it or not, we're still criminals, and we're stuck in a position where we need change. Jai is just one of many, many children who are alive because of cannabis, and we use a THCA cold extraction. Jai's not high. He was high on 35 tablets a day. He was bedridden. He attended school when he could, maybe 3 weeks out of the year. So, his whole life has changed, and we're celebrating those milestones, but yet we're still criminals, and yet Jai still can't attend school, even though he's able. And we're in the position now, if Jai ever needs hospital, the hospital has policies. We will be removed if we're administering. We will be escorted away with the police. My doctors have not reported me to docs. I've been up front, I've been in the media more times than I can remember. I've been very honest, and yet their hands are tied, and it's frustrating.
So Michele, tell us, so you've painted a very accurate picture, and it's interesting when you were also telling that, it took me back to something that seems to be a common misperception that's still perpetuated. In fact, the other night I was at a dinner, and a very senior government official said to me, "Oh, so it's great that the kids are getting it, but they're high," And so Do you still hear those kinds of comments?
Absolutely.
Do you think there's a fair way to go in terms of education?
Absolutely.
We'll get to access in a moment, but...
Yeah, no, absolutely. The minute families contact me, especially after doing media, they're like, where do you get your CBD from? You know, Jai has never had CBD. Jai has microdose amounts of a cold extraction of THCA, which is 38 parts per million. You know, it's very, very minuscule amounts, and, you know, he's alive because of that. And if we're to stop that, Jai will die. There's no ifs and buts. He's been resuscitated. We've performed CPR more times than I can remember. So this is life and death for us, and it's not easy because now it's the public's, you know, become more aware. The doctors are aware. But I think because everyone's focusing on the CBD, and I'm not saying CBD isn't great, it works for some people, but, you know, THC, we're not smoking it. I've even been asked how much I give Jai, you know, and I'm like, in what? You know, and they presume that THC is smoking, and, you know, at the end of the day, it's a medicine to me, and it's a lifeline, and it's harmless, and Jai, if anything, is more able and more clearer to think and function, and if he was certainly high, he wouldn't be able to do that.
I remember when we ran the story on Sunday night and we had a big viewer reaction to the words liquid gold.
Absolutely. I think the price of it, you know, the black markets, it's scary out there, and it's scary for any parent trying to source. You know, because the only options, I don't really want to touch base on that, but the options that the government have put forth are unaffordable, so it's causing more division of, you know, the rich and the poor, and the division of, you know, paediatric and adult epilepsy. Like, we're grateful Jai may now have the opportunity to his hit adulthood, teenagehood. We got the opportunity now for him to possibly hit adulthood, and that's a whole different ballgame again.
Probably where you didn't even think you'd be there.
The amount of times that we've had SUDEP thrown at us is horrific.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember at the time of the doco, someone told me that Jai's epilepsy was the same as Daisha's, yet they needed very different
Absolutely, Jai and
remedies.
Daisha have. Jai has the 3 rare epilepsy syndromes, but at the moment we have a lot of syndromes being thrown around. CSWS, continual spike wave syndromes, is what Daisha and Jai both had, and that means their subclinical activity is hitting at a percent of 80%, 85% and greater. So they're basically, when they go to sleep, they're in status. But Jai sadly has the ESES as well, and both of those conditions are automatically refractory. There is no pharmaceutical that treats these conditions. So, you know, the fact that we've found something, I actually sit here and feel quite selfish, because a lot of families go down the umbrella route of medication when doctors, like paediatric neurologists, know they can't treat this condition. And that's just one of 3 syndromes my son has. We're very rare.
What I found quite surprising in Israel, Dr. Ilan, you might correct me on this, and we'll get to you in a moment, Cherie, about your position too. But what I found in Israel was that they were willing to try, or, you know, that there was a willingness, not just to the depth of compassion, but if something didn't work, for instance, we're seeing with Daisha that we saw in the documentary, and with Jai, you know, some of the conditions are almost exact, but very, very different treatment options. So can you take us through how, you know, what the clinical diagnosis, and how prepared are doctors to try, I guess, different strains of CBD or THCA or whatever the blend might be?
Well, I think I'll talk in general, not specifically about ESES, because this is a very specific case, and there are some medical solutions that some drugs that we do advocate in the beginning. But taking in general, I think we need to divide the pediatric neurologic group and the pediatricians. The neurologists are, I think, more aware of it now, because in the past years, we've educated them through our conventions, our yearly conventions. We had 2 years ago, we had an epilepsy convention, which a whole session was dedicated to cannabis. And Professor Meshulam was the guest of honor there and gave the preliminary lecture. So I think the neurologists in general are more open to the idea. And this is I think the notion that was advocated here from the very beginning, the education, the education, the education. You have to educate the medical students, you have to educate the nurses, which are in the forefront. You have to educate the teachers, the educational system. We've encountered the same problems in Israel, and the problem was solved by medical permission. If I'm giving the medical permission for a child to be given, usually it's in special needs schools. So by definition, they are giving medications. So if I'm giving the permission to give the medical cannabis oil, it would be given. Although it's an illicit, it's a drug. It's an illicit drug by Israeli law. But if I'm giving the permission, it would be given. Now, pediatricians, it's a different crowd, or GPs. I think they're less educated in that matter. And in that sense, it would be, we still have a way to go there in terms of giving the right information and really provoking I hope it's the right word, of implementing the right idea towards the medical cannabis.
And is there also an acknowledgement that there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Is there also an acknowledgement among the medical fraternity in Israel that there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach? For instance, the nurses played quite a key role in implementing, monitoring the condition, and then perhaps administering something that was a slightly different blend, if you like. So it seems to me that we don't have, it gets away from the pharmaceutical model where we have the exact composition, the exact delivery and methodology each time.
It's not yet in the hands of the nurses, it's more in the hands of the pediatric neurologists.
Of course, but I'm saying they were part of the implementation process as well in terms of, I thought that was a unique thing that they worked very closely with their patients.
As I said, we're open to the idea, but the idea of changing strains, if I understand your question correctly, the idea of changing strains throughout the treatment is something that is there in our thoughts. It's not something that we're implementing now. To do so would be, we would have to increase the level of THC, which is something which we are very reserved. Unless we have children with severe sleep problems or children that have reached a certain age that we're not concerned about the development of their brain anymore because of the vast unknowns of the effects THC has on the developing brain. We don't know, so we have to be cautious there.
Yeah, case by case. Sherry, can I just go, thank you. Can I just go to you? You're in the exact opposite position in that Michelle's not just dealing, with Jai's condition and then now approaching adulthood as well. Certainly he's, reached a lot of milestones, but she would have in the back of her mind, obviously, the legalities and not quite knowing where that might end up. You're in the exact opposite position. Take us through how you got there and how your kids are going.
How I got there, I honestly don't really know. We just basically said to the school from word go, this is what we're doing, and we had really great doctors who wrote it down as a listed medication for our children. We've got 2 children needing medical cannabis, both on the Dravet spectrum, and the schools have been right behind us from day one. They've had doses at 3 different schools. you know, being in Victoria, the Royal Children's allow parents to administer. A number of smaller hospitals do as well. So yeah, we don't have the access issues that are happening, particularly in Queensland. Yeah.
Carol, how do you feel hearing these such vastly different stories and case studies, and then hearing the Israeli model as well?
Epilepsy Action works nationally, and we hear from people all the time now who want to access cannabis, want to get on trials. It's become the most common query that I think we have. But the first thing that hits me, and I know Cherie and Michele quite well, and a lot of other parents as well, is that this is really a time when state differences don't help. No. You know, things have gone more smoothly for people in the Victorian jurisdiction. Queensland is probably the opposite end of that, and all of the other states are somewhere in between. But I actually see, if I can comment, these people becoming quite tired. You know, you've actually got a small few that are speaking out and advocating. There are many, many more, hundreds, thousands of people that are in similar circumstances, and many of them have sourced an illicit product and it's making a difference to their kids, but they're not speaking out. It's fairly quiet. These guys have worked very hard, and a couple of other people I know have worked very hard.
Extremely courageous, yeah.
It's exhausting for them, and you know, I mean, what's convinced me, I mean, this is something that they've heard me say, a lot of people have heard me say many times, but I'm going to say it again. A few years ago, Epilepsy Action was in the position of saying, marijuana, that's dangerous, that can't possibly be a treatment option for children with epilepsy or people with epilepsy, especially children. I've watched, and people who work for me are nurses. I've watched these families, and in some cases known the children before and after medicinal cannabis. And I started to think to myself, well, you know, these people are making decisions that are quite dangerous. You know, they're breaking the law. They're actually giving a known drug to their children, sometimes very young children, and then they're reporting back incredible changes in that child's quality of life. So my mantra became, loving parents don't lie.
Great. That's exactly right. That underpins the debate, yeah. So Greg and Teresa, you're listening to all this, and underpinning all of this is an important human rights debate. And you've both, I imagine, in your own respective practices and roles, been at the coalface of that in so many ways. You've heard the panel speak, and you've heard very different stories. I'm sure you've heard similar stories to this, and it must feel, I can imagine at the very least, a little frustrating to think that there is a perception out there that it's widely accessible, or that medicinal cannabis is becoming legalised. That's what people often say to me, oh, isn't it great, the documentary, you know, and all the work that's been done, so now it's legal and everyone can access it. Yet, if they only saw my inbox every week and understood the desperation that remains there. Greg, firstly, can you take us through what, are you still hearing those stories? And in terms of access and I guess the difficulty and pressure that must surround you in your everyday role, how are you faring these days?
Look, that's all true in this sense that medical cannabis is been accepted by the law, and in fact, it's fair to say most judges and magistrates in Australia today, I think, would take the view that a person who is using medicinal cannabis, be they an adult or a parent giving it to a child, are entitled, if they are brought to court and sentenced, to a very lenient penalty. The former Chief Magistrate in Tasmania, Michael Hill, made comments about it 2 years ago. Chris Webster, who's a magistrate in Tasmania, shakes his head when these cases come to court and makes the point that in the majority of US jurisdictions this is now legal. And it's a classic case where judges and magistrates, and the law is forced, as it is with the lack of right to die laws and peaceful death laws, to enforce what are palpably unjust laws. Can I make this point, though, that one of the interesting issues which we're looking to run in a case that I'm involved in at the moment is whether or not the defence of medical necessity, applies. And just very briefly to run you through it. In Australia, in common law jurisdictions like Victoria and in jurisdictions like Queensland and Western Australia that have criminal codes, there is a defence available to people where a person undertakes an extreme action because the consequences to themselves or the other individual, the individual that they're seeking to protect, are so dire that they, of necessity, acted in that way. It was first used in abortion cases in the late 1960s in Australia, where doctors were being prosecuted for having abortions, and of course the ruling in most states was that an abortion is legal if the mother's life or mental or physical well-being is in jeopardy. That doctrine applies to medical cannabis. It hasn't been used, but we're exploring it in cases at the moment. Of course, you just hope that people weren't prosecuted and that you didn't have to use the defence of this medical necessity, which, as I say, I think is very much alive. The second issue, though, is the need for law reform to provide a defence. If we're not going to legalise cannabis fully, which I support, and most lawyers support, then there ought to be an exemption in the criminal law and in drugs legislation that says if you possess cannabis and use cannabis for medical purposes, whether it be children or adults, this is a cast-iron defence for prosecution. Because at the moment what happens is that if you produce a letter from a doctor, and doctors are in a difficult position, and what they tend to write is that the patient finds it efficacious, courts will then take that on board and probably you'll get away without a conviction, but it ought to be a defence so that these matters don't go to court at all. And you can't rely on the police. As a criminal defence lawyer, I'd say you should never rely on the police, as a matter of course, but you can't rely on the police not to prosecute, despite the words of police commissioners who say, well, it's not a priority for us to prosecute in medical cannabis cases. The reality is they still prosecute. And so people are left in this invidious position. I mean, the fact that we've got two people who sit here today who feel, rightly so, that they've been criminalised is just scandalous. And the case for law reform in this area is urgent. And if we had politicians with spines in this country, it would be that.
The legislations are slightly different, I guess, in New South Wales where you're based, but hearing Greg's argument, are there many, are you in agreement with all elements of it? Is there anything that you think that we have to further canvass in terms of our approach around the legislation? So, yes, you, yeah.
Well, Helen, I've been in this industry for 25 years and I've worked with all of the therapeutic goods legislation, and by and far the legislation surrounding medicinal cannabis is the most complex I've ever had to deal with. It is really a Kafkaesque nightmare to deal with. There is the federal legislation to deal with, and then there is legislation in each state. Now, traditionally with therapeutic goods, we've had the federal layer of regulation, and as long as you comply with federal law, for every other therapeutic good except for medicinal cannabis, you have been able to then prescribe that product. For some reason with medicinal cannabis, we've introduced an extra layer of regulation. And so patients who are seeking access to medicinal cannabis, whether it be through Category A of the Special Access Scheme, or Category B, or through Authorised Prescriber Scheme, or through clinical trials, they have to first get approval from the TGA, and then they have to get approval from the state. Now, this is a real access problem. It will be difficult to lobby, but there is no logical reason, in my view, to have that state layer of regulation, because the TGA does do a very good job of regulating therapeutic goods. And as long as you comply with the guidelines, then you will get access to treatment. So that is point one. The second point, and this is perhaps more recently I've become involved in this because of the human rights issue. We have a fundamental Charter of Human Rights which says that everyone has a right to access to healthcare. And if you look at patients like Jai and Tara, the severity of their conditions and the cocktail of drugs that they've been on themselves have caused serious mental and physical disability. The principle of do no harm, I understand that principle, and when a doctor says, I'm not going to treat the patient with medicinal cannabis because I have to uphold this principle of do no harm, are they not doing more harm by denying access to treatment? And putting patients at more risk by taking a huge cocktail of drugs when all they could be doing is taking medicinal cannabis. Now, I know it doesn't work in every case, but that's why we have personalised medicine. That's why we have the possibility of doctors structuring the treatment of medicinal cannabis and the composition of medicinal cannabis to suit the needs of the patient. So this has become quite a journey for me. I initially started in this to assist companies in setting up businesses in medicinal cannabis, but I've become so taken by some of the stories here that I went to my management and we have set up a pro bono system where we can try and help parents at least get access.
Teresa, I love the way that you beautifully articulated another core issue, which is everyone having equality around healthcare and decisions and choices around that. We have around 5 minutes left, and I'm just wondering if there's any pressing questions from the audience. Yep.
There's only a few small groups in the moment where we can potentially prescribe and get access to medicinal for patients. In the areas where there is strong evidence that it is a beneficial treatment, would the docs be liable and is it okay to provide that advice on, say, Australian, those who do administration, etc., for that patient, knowing that they can't access it legally? But if you were to give the correct advice, this would be my advice for you to get the best medical outcome.
I'll make a comment first. It's a good question. With any treatment that's unapproved, the federal system of regulation includes the requirement for a patient to give genuine informed consent, firstly. So in the case of a seriously ill child who would like to access medicinal cannabis, as long as the parents are advised that the product is an unapproved product, of any potential risks associated with the product, even unknown risks that might not have been discovered, and that parent or the child, if they're over 18, if you can call that a child, my adult children are certainly still children in my mind. So as long as they give genuine informed consent, then that is one element of discharging liability. And the other element of discharging liability is an indemnity. So the parent can give an indemnity to the doctor that they won't be held liable. Now, on the other side, as to whether they'll be liable under the law for administering an illegal drug, that's a more complex question. Craig?
Yeah, I mean, that's a perfect articulation of the law. And in relation to criminal liability, I'm not aware of any prosecutions of doctors for approving or aiding and abetting possession of cannabis. In fact, most sensible doctors take a view, and I've seen it in letters they write for patients, they take a very pragmatic view that essentially says, do I want my patient to be addicted to OxyContin, which is far more harmful, by the way, very harmful, or are they finding cannabis efficacious? And most doctors simply discharge, I think, any chance of criminal liability by saying simply that the patient advised that they found this medication efficacious. I didn't disagree with them. That's not adding and abetting. So I don't think there is a great risk of criminal liability. I hate to say this, but you'd almost want the police to go after a doctor, because that might get the AMA and Sebastian and the others who are going to speak this afternoon to get off their asses and do something about it.
Given that one of the promises of the Hippocratic Oath is to do no harm, is the present legislation putting doctors in an unenviable situation where they're actually in breach of their own Hippocratic Oath?
Well, I don't think they are. I mean, in what sense do you think the legislation? I mean,
by actually not supporting parents.
I'm sorry. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting just hearing about the way the TGA's added this other layer, and the states all want to cover the medical cannabis. I suspect that for revenue-raising reasons, because that's all the states ever want, is more revenue. But I think you're right, and I think the point was made a moment ago that how can it be consistent with your oath to not be able to prescribe them or to have these barriers put in your way? So yes, I think governments are forcing doctors into a second-best position.
And therefore, is the AMA aware of that?
Well, the AMA seems to have complicated views on this issue, and I noticed that Sebastian Simon and Tim Greenaway, who's also, I don't know Sebastian, Tim, no? Is he? And Tim Greenaway is here. They're on this afternoon. They pulled out. There's your answer.
But the point that Donna makes is a relevant one, and Ilan mentioned earlier today that I think part of the problem is a lack of education and a lack of stigma still associated with the use of cannabis for medicinal purposes. So I think we would benefit from educating medical practitioners that cannabis used in this context is not dangerous. And the issue about do no harm, Ingrid Schaefer in the documentary said, we don't know what cannabis will do to the brain. And that is true, but at this point in time there has been quite substantial use of cannabis and there is no evidence of any adverse effects on the brain. And so if I'm to make a choice about a theoretical proposition as opposed to the incredible damage I will cause to a child if I deny them of treatment, then I think I would choose to treat with cannabis.
Yep, Carol.
I'm probably belabouring this point a bit, but it's actually written into the legislation that doctors have no choice, that we are not allowed to prescribe medical cannabis until all other avenues have been exhausted. And if this isn't just the worst violation of do no harm, that we are legally forced to do harm. So I just don't know how they can justify that. And I mean, and how can we overcome this? How can we have it removed from the legislation so that if we choose to use it as a first-line medication, we can? Because we know that we are doing less harm by using medical cannabis first, and then if that fails, we have a whole world of pharmaceutical agents that we can use that do more harm. But, so to me, that seems to be one of the most important things that needs to be addressed in the legislation. We need to grant the patients back their right to choose what medicine they have.
I'm in the position of both being a GP but also a son with severe intractable epilepsy. And we just started with my son 2 months ago on CBD, and it's led to about a 50% improvement in his seizures, which is great. He's got some days where he's bright and alert and really with it, whereas at puberty his condition worsened. but I've been in the situation, there's guidelines to access CBD through the Special Access Scheme, but there's only one product in New South Wales that's available that will cost between $100,000 and $150,000 a year. And so I rang my medical defence and they're just saying I had to be very wary about doing another product myself and that I should go through the official guidelines, which is the SAS scheme. So in New South Wales, there's really no options for children to get CBD on a legitimate basis.
Teresa, can you and Carol as well?
Yeah. I think there are a number of issues, and in fact, Jeff, thank you. Jeff and I are due to see the Premier next week and hopefully make some impact. But I think there are a number of issues. I mean, if you speak to the Office of the Drug Control and the TGA, they will tell you that the legislation is in place to allow choice. And I have feet in a couple of different camps, so I do sit on a council advising the Minister at the federal level, but I also know the consumers very, very well. I know that some of them at the moment are trying their best to access a legal product. They're currently using illicit and they're trying to access a legal product. Extraordinarily different, difficult. And one of the problems is the lack of authorised prescribers. We're told all the time that there are 25 prescribers out there. Now, I know that 23 of those prescribers are attached to Epidiolex trials or compassionate access. So the only possibility is if you get onto a trial and you get Epidiolex, they're not people that are out there looking at a range of products. But then the range of products is a problem because there's only particular products that have been brought into Australia at the moment. And again, you have to either navigate, SASCAT-B for the most part, or find an authorised prescriber. And as I've said, they're not out there. So there are huge problems at the legislative level still, the red tape around it. But also we deal with quite a lot of doctors. We talk to quite a lot of doctors, mostly in our case neurologists, but also general practitioners. And they would still say the evidence is not there. Now, we've been here for the last couple of days and seeing a lot of evidence, but that is a constant line that I hear. The evidence is not there. And what they're talking about is, randomised, blind, placebo trials and done in Australia. That's what they're talking about. So that's a common line. So the first hoop is actually finding a doctor prepared to support you.
We've only got time for a couple of more questions. Yep.
Can I just do one? One of the things I think that's been brought up, and a really important point, is that there's actually a lot of doctors, specialists out there who are really interested in medicinal cannabis because it has become quite evident. The problem comes is that they are looking for a course on education, on, to know more about it, how to prescribe, to actually understand it. And I think when we're looking at legislation, we also have to look at the ability to educate a lot of the doctors who are wanting this information and then actually having access. So I think that there's a lot of different levels that are needing to be obtained. So I don't think that we should put down a lot of the doctors. I think that we should actually help to educate them. The other thing when you're just talking about clinical trials is that, yes, they actually do want double-blind clinical trials, and they are actually happening, but there's also comparative effectiveness. And that's where I think that they need to actually look at more than just double-blind placebo-controlled trials.
And haven't we got here an issue of time? I mean, a lot of this work is actually going to take years and years and years and years and years. And I fully support those processes that will bring about, legal access to good cannabinoid products. But we've got families right now in dire straits, and I know there are other people with terminal illness, cancer and other things in dire straits.
There's a lot of medications that have been trialled on Jai that never have. I was just saying to Carol that, one of Jai's medications, or one of many, were CAD-A approved. They weren't TGA approved, they were FDA approved. So, that medication was rang up in the office and basically on the table within 24 hours. So my argument is that, You know, considering we'd exhausted 14 medications, failed the ketogenic diet, failed IVIG, which is, I believe, $25,000 a vial, which was 8 vials, considering we had FDA approval for a Cat A medication, what's the problem with cannabis, and why can't we, if it comes down to imports, have access to that on the PBS instantly, like we did with the medications, the pharmaceutical medications that did more damage?
Can I just 1 moment before we go to you? I just wanted to go to the lady at the front.
I'm a mother of a 3-year-old medically complex child who I'm currently sourcing an oil from Colorado, high CBD, low THC. We're in Victoria. Every single specialist, doctor, nurse, everyone I come across, I tell them exactly what I'm giving my son. And they're very open to what I'm doing with my son because it is a regressive disorder. He will eventually succumb to, the various issues that come along. We know that the medicinal cannabis is working for him. They are very open to the information, but they cannot give me any help or advice on what I'm doing. I know I need different strains. I don't know where to access it from. What my question is going on from the doctors need, we're hearing it all through this weekend and yesterday, the doctors need more education. They need more help in prescribing it. What can we do as the public? We're all here for the same reason. How can we move forward and help get these doctors educated so that more people can access it and more products can be on the market that we can access legally? What can we do?
David Caldecott.
I'm one person, and they like to hear from me, but they all sort of go, yeah, but we can't help you any further.
And that's where you need to go. The education side of things is important. We're trying very hard. We will get that. GPs are interested. There's engagement.
Yeah.
But block is at the political level. Our friend Greg has been telling us about legislation. And the judges, if there's legislation, which the judges even don't want to apply. Some of the police don't want to apply. It's the politics that has to go. And just keep the pressure up and fall across.
Yeah.
I think also, we think we're doing nothing by just being the one person, but like my daughter was the first paediatric here in Australia to openly use medical cannabis, and now personally I've had over 3,000 contact me in this country that are now using it for a paediatric child. So what we did as one person has now snowballed, and so you think it's small now, but by educating that doctor and saying, hey, this is working. I'm now getting phone calls from 6 or 7 doctors a week saying, hey, I can't help them, but can I give them your number? And it's ridiculous that is what has to happen. We've gone from 200 plus seizures a day to now having none for 1,542 days. It's ridiculous.
Answering your question about different strains, an open discussion with the herbalists, we do have it in Israel, I think would help you here also, because they are faced with it on an everyday basis, and we learn a lot from them.
Okay. And you've been waiting for a while.
That's all right.
Sorry. Thanks for your patience.
That's perfectly okay. Good morning. Just a quick couple of questions for the mothers. I'm not sure about the rest of the panel. I was curious to know whether or not you two ladies have been licensed, as it were. Have you gone through the process? Have they given you the okay? We listened to Mr. Turner yesterday say that there were only 120 people in Australia who are legally supposed to be able to use it. And it appeared to me for him to say that if he had 10,000 applications on his desk, that there would be 10,000 people being able to access it. And my question is, you two are using it. You're obviously up there in front of the group. Have you gone through the hoops? Do you have access? Is it super easy? Can we just do it tomorrow?
No. We have signed SAS Category A forms. Our GP was then threatened with deregistration for signing them. He has stood by us. He has contacted every department to try and do this legally. But like Michelle here, we are using microdosing of THCA from a leading provider here in Australia. I am not prepared to use a different product because this product works. You know, this product is showing an 80% success rate in kids. You know, there's a lot of talk about a 50% reduction of seizures. Well, a 50% reduction of seizures is still 100 a day for my child on a good day. That's not success. Success is my child from going from, you know, 80% of her time in a wheelchair to running and dancing and getting up on stage and reading and writing and doing all the things that normal kids do. We have tried and tried and tried. Nobody can give us a straight answer whether our SAS Category A form actually means anything, but it has given us the ability to access services because they don't know either whether it means anything.
So we've just got time for, thank you so much. Just two really quick questions, please. Yeah.
I'll be finished. I'll be finished in 1 second.
Okay, great.
But I know this is a medical symposium, so here's a little acronym for you guys, CPR. We all need to be caring towards each other, and I don't hear that from the governments, and I don't hear much about pain. I think pain medicine should be available to all the masses at the lowest level, and obviously the reefers is what should be given because it's the safest, lowest harm product that can be given. And the overriding principle is harm minimisation. And I'm worried that, that we're not going to have care plans in place that are going to accommodate the common person at a low level. It's all these severely critically ill people that are the front runners, but I'd like to have Panadol for everybody. Yeah. And I'm a health professional, and harm minimisation is the key word here.
Great. Okay. Final question.
I want to comment about two things that I heard in the last half an hour. First, to complete what Ilan said and to make it more clear, we are not using many strains in Israel for epilepsy. We are using just 2 strains. EP1 extract and avideckel extract, which are both high CBD, low THC, 20:1. We start with 5 milligrams per child and going up. Ilan, correct me if I'm right. We are not changing these strains, and the reason is, as you said, education. And to educate the physician, it's a nice thing to say, but who can educate the physician? Who do you think know what to give? We don't have this knowledge. What do you mean to educate? Somebody needs to have this knowledge and to teach it. We don't have it. Nobody is in this room have the knowledge. Or in Israel, Ilan just said about the herbalist. He's talking about Sharon. I know her very well. Once in a week she's coming to the lab. Do you think she have the knowledge what to give? She's trying on her child. She's changing. She started now to give THCA. It's all guinea pigs. We don't know what to give. So on one child it's work microdosing, and the other child's work 800 milligrams. We don't know, and to educate, you need first to have the knowledge. I'm teaching in the med school. I'm not teaching things that I don't know. I teach just things that I have evidence, and I learned what to know. The reality, and this is reality, I'm sorry to be the bad person here. The reality is that we don't know. We hear one case, and we're running to the media and we said, hey, look, it works here, why not to give? Why not to give it as the first medicine? Because it's not the best medicine that Ilan's have in his hands. How many kids you give another medicine which works? We're not talking about these ones, right? We're looking about 2 mothers that they tried many medicines and it didn't work for them. How many kids, the first medicine that Helen gives works? The percentage is 47%. So there is a big success on the first medicine for epilepsy. Do you want to change it to a different medicine that works less? No. We need cannabis to be another medicine on the shelf that the physician will think if to give it or not. For sure it should be a medicine on shelf. But in the end, I'm a father for 4 children. When I'm going to physician, I want him to choose the best treatment for my child. I don't care if it came from cannabis, Fitunia, or synthesized. I want my child to be healthy. And we all want it, okay? Doesn't mean that cannabis is the best treatment for everything. I tried it, not growing hair on my head, okay? It's not solving everything. We need to educate ourselves. We need more research. It needs to be open. There is no doubt that it's working. There is no doubt that it's medicine. We don't have the tools to educate the physician yet. I hope we will have in a year or 2. I hope more laboratories like mine will work. I hope more clinical trials like Helen is doing will be happening. And in the end, we will have this knowledge to educate. I think as a community that's working on cannabis, we must educate each other every day what we learn and to take it farther and farther.
Thank you, Daddy. I think I just want to emphasize, us as physicians, it's not just the notion of doing no harm. We are the guardians of the treasure. You deposit your treasure with us. And we have to guard this treasure with all our hearts. And this is relating to John. We do it with all our hearts. And I think that the advice that can be given by people who do have some more experience, or at least as much experience as us with the patients, is to keep our minds open to their advice. Of course, we have to test it. Of course, we have to be to scrutinize it, and we have to be very critical about it.
But I think what patients are asking for here is for medicinal cannabis to be a treatment option. If another medicine worked, a lot of people wouldn't be in this room.
Exactly.
The issue is
this one's
that,
far more contentious.
Access is being stifled to medicinal cannabis. And the education issue is an interesting question, because the people that have had experience with medicinal cannabis can talk about that experience and the benefits that they have seen in their patients. Medical practitioners would be more comfortable, I think, if they had their peers talking about it. And if we are in an era of personalised medicine, we don't know whether one particular product will work, but we do have the ability to titrate medication, to adjust the composition, to see if it will work.
I think what Daddy demonstrated beautifully yesterday is how much we don't know. And we have to be very humble about that.
Yeah.
And to know that what we are seeing is just on the outside. We have to dig in much deeper in order to educate correctly. Yeah. And this is absolutely true.
And again, I think we don't know what we don't know, and that's why the government's talking about clinical guidance, not even clinical guidelines. And I suspect that clinical guidance will just be around prescribing the available medications that are brought into Australia. But just to clarify on people with epilepsy too, I mean, some 65 to 70% of people with epilepsy will get a current anti-epileptic medication or a combination of anti-epileptic medications that will control their seizures. So we're not talking about everybody with epilepsy, we're talking about those people with intractable epilepsy, children and adults, people like Michelle's child and Cherie's child, when nothing else worked. You know, it was a desperate situation and nothing else worked. And yet neither of these people and a range of other people I know can get a legal solution.
And yeah, on that, my husband is still on anti-epileptic drugs. He's well controlled on those, so he's made the choice to stay on those. But I guess from my point of view as a parent is if you're a doctor and you're going to prescribe them, please educate the parents about the side effects, because we did not know that, you know, my child was going to get anorexia and a heart murmur and, you know, tunnel vision, all these different things that have all been caused by the anti-epileptic drugs. We're now in the position that we actually don't know which things were solved by medical cannabis and which things were solved by coming off pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, and so that's so interesting. I'm just going to have, sorry, we are so over time. I'm going to, my next speaker is going to kill me. So just a quick final. Someone was about to wrap up. Was it Carol?
I was just
okay, Michelle, you've got the final word. I'm sorry, guys, we can't do any more questions.
No, I don't want the final word. I was just going to say, you know, my experience, which regardless of any medical condition, as parents, we don't know as much about cannabis as much as we don't about the pharmaceuticals. The long-term problems my son will endure now and possibly end up in a wheelchair later in life is because of pharmaceutical damage. I asked the questions but didn't ask enough, and it's a real problem, and I'm just frustrated and needed to add that in.
Thank you so much. Thank you. To all of our panellists, I'm sorry that we have actually run out of time, but there will be time in the lunch hour for you to approach our panellists. Can you please, everybody, thank Dr. Ilan, Greg Barnes, Carol Ireland from Epilepsy Action Australia, Dr. Teresa Nicoletti, Cherie O'Connell and Michele Whitelaw. Thank you so much for your time. And thanks to all of you for such engaging questions and for the distinction and clarity that's been provided in this Q&A. So thank you.